The Bermuda Triangle, strange mysteries of the sea. Ships and planes simply disappear. Perhaps you have a Bermuda Triangle right in your own backyard and don't even know it. We'll explore this and more on Captain's Log.
This is Captain's Log with your host, Captain Mark Gray. Welcome aboard. Blending comfort, performance, and value, Catalina Yachts continue a tradition of building outstanding sailboats in every class. Sail the Catalina 30 and experience the successful combination of a modern, efficient hull shape with spacious accommodations that create the perfect balance in a modern racer cruiser. America's largest sailboat manufacturer invites you to call a Catalina yacht dealer in your area today.
Our guest is Mr. Eugene Wheeler, author and publisher of Shipwrecks, Smugglers, and Maritime Mysteries. There's also a chart that goes along with this book. Would you please welcome our guest, Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you.
Tell me, sir, how did this book come into creation? How much research went into it? And how did you do the research?
Well, after sailing in the Channel for several years, I noticed there were a lot of accidents, and I found people fairly often coming up to boats at Santa Cruz when I would be anchored there, asking people if they could borrow some gasoline to get back to the mainland. Well, that struck me as rather strange that people would be that careless to go to the islands without being more prepared. So I started doing research which covered about a 3-year period of time, and then wrote the book and co-authored it with a friend of mine from Santa Barbara County, Bob Coleman.
Mm-hmm. I understand that this is the chart that goes along with your book. Could you perhaps explain that a little for our viewers?
Yes, you mentioned the Bermuda Triangle. We have our own triangle here. Starts pretty much at down near Point Magoo, which would be the eastern part of the channel, this being the Santa Barbara Channel, the triangle, and it starts pretty much where Point Arguilla is and Point Conception, and then on the southern part, starting with San Miguel Island, and then Santa Rosa, Santa Cruz, and Anacapa Island. So roughly in this area is where a lot of accidents have occurred. This incident, this is where Santa Barbara is located. Ventura is over in here. Port Hueneme is in this location.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that you have smuggling on the top, maritime events, and piracy. How many different topics does this cover?
Well, generally it's about 6. Shipwrecks, piracy, maritime events, and smuggling. And it goes over a period of time starting when the Spanish first arrived up to the present era.
So it's more or less a chronology of Channel Islands from the days of the Indians up to modern-day smugglers and murderers and things of that sort.
Yes, that's right.
Would you be so kind as to give up a little bit of your book and tell an interesting story or two from it to our viewers?
Yes, I think, well, there's a number of accidents that have occurred here. Probably the worst from the Navy's viewpoint. I think at the time it was the greatest peacetime tragedy to happen to the U.S. Navy was in 1923 when Squadron 11, which consisted of 14 destroyers, and these were all modern destroyers at that time, and they left San Francisco after an extensive cruise and fleet maneuvers in the Pacific during the summer. So they were heading to San Diego at the end of this period of time, and they were very anxious to get back. But their commander had indicated that they were to cruise at 20 knots, which is a fairly high rate of speed for them, and not to deviate from that. Well, about 8:30 at night, they neared the Santa Barbara Channel, and the and they were going by dead reckoning at that time. There was a radio directional finder at Point Arguello, but the commander of Squadron 11 and the navigator didn't really believe in radio directional finders at that time. Their chart indicated that the tracking of the ships indicated they were about 12 miles offshore. Well, actually, they were very close to shore. So they made a turn eastward to go down the channel, and 9 o'clock they hit the near Honda, near Point Arguello, going at 20 knots speed. As a result of that navigational error, 7 of them crashed into the rocky shoreline and were ultimately destroyed. The remaining ships, hearing the warnings, backed off in time and were saved. 2 of them actually scraped a little bit, but they were not damaged very much. And in that accident, 23 men were killed, and out of the 800 men on board, about 100 were pretty badly injured. So that's probably the worst, I think, that's occurred along the coast.
So I guess you could say no matter how much training, education, and experience one might have, if there's a bad situation that can come about, chances are it will come about, so it's good to be prepared.
Yes, and they could have taken precautions. One of the officers asked if they couldn't slow down and throw the lead line down to see how deep the shore was, because there had been some signals from Point Arguello that some of the destroyers had listened to, and they asked, so they indicated that these signals told them they were close by, but the captain or the commanding officer did not believe in them, and as a result a terrible tragedy took place, and his career was ruined as well as several others.
I understand, as I mentioned earlier, you are a publisher as well, and obviously you do publish ocean-type books and sea books.
Yes.
How would a young aspiring person, perhaps a young man out at the islands on a sailboat that has written something or is going to, how would he go through a process with contacting you, perhaps offering it? You know, what's required?
Well, I think he first needs to do enough research or have a pretty good story so that there's something we can see. I think it's better if you can give a completed or nearly completed manuscript to a publisher, whether it's my firm or anyone else's.
Mm-hmm. And I always try to ask as well, how much boating background do you have in the area? I
have over 16 years. I don't have a boat at the present time. I had a Cal 34 for a number of years when I was sailing here, and I sailed in the West Indies. I had a 33-foot cutter there and had some smaller boats in the Chesapeake area.
Okay. We'll be back with Beauchamp Motion, boating fashion in motion, right after these messages.
Ventura Harbor Village is a colorful waterfront complex with over 40 varieties of shops, international cuisine, and even a nostalgic carousel just for fun. Whether you take a harbor cruise or just watch the fishermen unload their catch of the day, it's a great place for the whole family. Ventura Harbor Village, located on Spinnaker Drive in the Ventura Harbor. Public docks are available for those coming by boat.
Marina sailing, experience it, the vacation of a lifetime. Islands to explore, sheltered coves to discover, clear water to enjoy. You say you don't know how to sail? Well, that's okay, because we've been teaching people to sail for over 25 years. In fact, we're California's oldest and largest sailing club with 70 boats and 3 locations to serve you. Come on down, take the challenge. We're Marina Sailing.
Our first model is Johanna De Hoya. She's wearing a body glove suit, pink, with a neoprene side, nice back, very high cut up on the side, very nice action suit. Good colors for Johanna. Thank you. Our next young lady is Kathy Delano. She works in the marina over by the bikini shop. She's wearing a Jag two-piece, 3 different colors. It's a French cut bottom, a butterfly top. Nice back on that suit. Thank you, Kathy. Our next model is Michelle Picard. She's wearing a Point Conception suit, pink and white. It's got the roll bottom, nice little bandeau top. Thank you very much, Michelle. Here comes Diane Burlington. She's wearing some of our sports clothes. It's raisin. It's in the rayon material. There's bathing suits to match. This comes in 3 different colors. This is the lilac, comes in peach, and also gray. Thank you, Diane. Now back to you, Mark. Thank you.
Let's give them a warm hand. My next guest is Mr. Dick Kaufman. He's an author of what I would call the world's best logbook in the world. I mean, the whole universe, perhaps, outer space. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Dick Kaufman. So Dick, it's really, I must say it's a pleasure having you on here first.
Thank you. Thank you.
And please tell us how you created this logbook, how it came into being.
Well, I did what most boaters do when they buy a boat. They start looking for a logbook or some way to journalize what they do with their boat and their trips and their maintenance repairs and their friends and so forth. So I started shopping around, and I continued to shop for several months, and I couldn't find anything that I particularly liked.
Right. I understand you've traveled around the world and compiled a collection of logbooks.
I've collected a few. Here's a few that I have that I at one time was going to use. This is a fairly elaborate ship's logbook that you see around. I didn't think that would suit my needs. This one has a real pretty cover, but it's rather thin, and you can only document one area of information in it, so that didn't suit my purposes. Here's a brand new one from the Dolphin Book Club that they're quite proud of. Again, every page is the same, and so for my purposes, it didn't suit me too well. Then I have some more here. Here's a
it's quite a collection, Dick.
Here's a real small one. You could lose this easily on your boat. Here's one that's written by the people that put out the Chapman's book, which I think every boater should have a copy of the Chapman's book. Unfortunately, this log is about 50% ballast, because most of the information in here is printed from the Chapman's book.
So it has a lot of
it makes it thicker, yeah. This is a nice one put out by Cruising World magazine. This is quite popular. A lot of people use this. But I noticed as soon as I bought it, I started reading the back here, and it says this is a legal record. And then I opened up on the inside, and it said this is not a legal record. Unless you take it to a notary public and have every page notarized as you...
it's kind of hard to do between here and Hawaii.
Yeah, it didn't make much sense, so I didn't use this one. I found this one for $80. They'll put your name on it. It's printed on stationery, and every page, again, is identical. So I didn't decide to use that either. The offshore log is pretty popular. I met the author of this. But it's like some of the other books on the market. One of the maritime attorneys I talked to told me that any logbook that you can buy where you can remove a page that easily is not a legal document, because I could recreate that whole day, and if I was involved in a collision or something.
If my girlfriend fell overboard and sued me,
you just pull that page and act like you didn't know her.
Pull that page out, and the lawyer would go the other way.
So after going through that experience for several months, and I thought I had an opportunity to go to England, and I thought for sure I'll find a proper log in England. Well, I didn't in all of Europe or the East Coast or the book clubs, so that's how I've come to write this one.
Could you tell us about this book and
what's
different about it?
Well, first of all, you notice it's bigger than all of these, and it outweighs them, I think. But it's got everything I thought that I wanted on my boat in there. When you open it up, you'll see a chart of the English Channel. It's an actual chart dated 1588. And the first chapter we have in the book, that's a lighthouse out of England. If you ever sail up in that area, be sure to sail by the Eddystone Light. The first chapter has a sample page from all the chapters in the book. And I noticed that a lot of these books, they don't tell you what the author had in mind. So we took a sample page from all the chapters and we made some sample entries. So by thumbing through the first chapter, you'll see a representative page of all the chapters in the book. We notice how we glue the pages together.
Here we go.
There we go. Now, one thing didn't make sense to me in most of the logbooks I found is they have one cruising section, and for my purposes, the cruising section was either too simple to be used for one day or too elaborate to be used on a passage, so I put in two of them. And the first one's called the coastal log. It's from just when you go out for the day. And the second chapter is the passage log for your longer trips. It's a 2-day format, very detailed. Then you have the navigator's log, because I'm always losing my navigation notes and I have to retrace them to look for a mistake, so I put in the navigator's log. And then the radio log, which is standard in a lot of books. The waypoint log normally is found as a separate book, but it's part of this one. And I can never remember what charts I had, and to make sure I had enough charts for my passage, so I have a chart inventory. And I'm always losing food on the boat, so I put in a storage ledger section. And a guest registry, of course. And then here's a section I think is a lot of fun. It's people you meet on other boats while you're at the islands sailing around. And then my specification section. And then after that, there's 5 more pages like this, so you can add your own specifications. And then when you modify your boat, you can make diagrams of what you've done. Here's your spare parts inventory. And a maintenance log, which is, there's quite a bit of maintenance log in the book. And then your repair log, ship's inventory, expenses. You might want to document your education and your experiences on other vessels. So to me, that would make a proper ship's logbook, and then this is where the log actually starts.
It's the most comprehensive logbook, as I say, the best in the world that I know.
Probably one of the heaviest you've seen. It does weigh 6 pounds. And one of the first things I noticed after I developed that was it didn't fit on my bookshelf. So I ran out and designed a teak stowage rack for it. And you can mount this rack anywhere on a bulkhead, and that was stow and
yeah, that's real handsome. Has a little name out here. Works quite well.
Now, on my Atlantic crossing, we had to, in Portugal and Bayona, Spain, we had to bring aboard our ships. We had to take into customs our ship's logbook, our passports and visas and ship's papers, and we threw it all in a garbage bag and jumped in the dinghy and rowed ashore. So I thought when I built this, when I designed this, that it should have a carrying case for the same purposes. So then I came up with this idea. Now this will hold the book, but in here it's got a pouch for passports and visas or fishing license or whatever, and then all of your ownership documents, of course, and your boat keys, pens and pencils. And with the book in here, should you drop this in the water, it will float. So that's how I ended up with all this.
How much are these things, the logbook versus the accessories?
Well, the book is brand new, and it's just recently hit the market, and the book retails for $80. The solid teak rack to stow it in comes unstained, and I think that retails for about $36. And the Sea Brief, which is a water-resistant case that does float and carries all your ship's documents and the book and everything, that retails for $38.
Okay, I would like to say that it's been a real pleasure. I'm glad that I could have you up here to explain all this to us. And coming up next is a section called Sea Tales. This is a true story segment of problems that people have had in the ocean, how they survived, and perhaps how you could better survive that type of situation. We'll be right back. Sea Tales are true boating stories. Please welcome our guest for that segment of the show, Mr. Chuck Stanton.
Thank you. Just so that you don't think I'm a loser completely, I've been sailing for about 25 years. And I've run aground a couple of times. I've had a boat fire. I've lost several sails overboard, things like that. All of them get chalked up to experience. The one I want to tell you about today is, I don't know how many people have been through a dismasting. It's something that it's hard to read about, get information on, and I can give you some first-hand experience. I've been through 2 of them. The one I want to tell you about is a race that I had on a 30-foot boat to Mexico about 8 years ago. And I had a crew of 6 on board, and these guys were all accomplished sailors. They all owned their own boats. And that was kind of fortunate because nobody panicked. We were racing about 4 or 5 hours out of Newport Beach, and about 10 miles outside of Oceanside, the wind started to pipe up. It was blowing about 20 to 30 knots, and my plan was to keep the boat with a full head of sail up. That was a spinnaker and a main and a spinnaker staysail until the boat was going out of control so much that we should take the spinnaker down and reduce sail. The reason for this, in a sailboat race, you want to keep the boat going as fast as you can, and all the other boats are doing it, so you more or less have to do the same thing. So we took a couple of knockdowns, which wasn't any big deal, and then one of the staysail wires on the bow let go, and I had to send somebody forward to take down a small jib up on the bow. So the 2 people that were working that were getting that sail down on deck, and it was my plan, as soon as they finished that task, that they would take down the spinnaker and we would set another head sail. About that time we took a knockdown, and they hung on, as we all do. The boat lays right down on the water, lays right on its side in the water, then it rounds up and the sails fill away again and off you go. This time when the boat rounded up and came up straight again for the sails to fill, one of the lazy sheets on the spinnaker somehow cleated itself, and so when the spinnaker filled, it filled with a resounding crash, a real shock to the boat, and the mast broke at the upper spreaders and then at the lower, and then it fell forward on top of one of the guys making sail on the foredeck. This pinned him to the deck. So at that point I had to determine how badly he was injured and who else was injured. He looked like he was in pretty bad shape because his torso was folded between his legs, and he couldn't get out from underneath the mast because the rig was now in the water, and it was held somewhat on the boat, and he was pinned underneath the mast. And there was a good chance that his back was broken. So what I did, in order to find out a lot of information about him right away, I just hollered, "Larry, crawl back to the cockpit." And at that point, fear kind of takes over, and he rolled out from underneath the mast, and he started to crawl back towards me. I was in the cockpit with a couple of crew members, and the fact that he could crawl told me that his back wasn't broken. So when he got to the cockpit, I said, "You go below, and we'll take it from there." And he was able to do that. So I knew he may have had a sprained back, or his leg was pretty badly mauled up, but I knew I didn't have a real serious injury. The next thing to do when the mast is down in the water, it's all tied to the boat by rigging. The standing rigging, the sheets and everything are holding the mast to the boat. So because the boat's rolling, the mast is now crashing into the side of the boat, trying to sink us. It's punching a hole through the side of the boat. So I was kind of short on equipment, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit because I want to tell you what I learned from this. We had a hacksaw on board, and we cut all the turnbuckles, and we got all the sheets squared away. It seemed like it took forever, but it was about a half an hour to do this. In the meantime, the mast was punching a larger hole in the side of the boat. So we had everything cleared, and we held it for about 30 seconds while we made sure there weren't any halyards wrapped around the propeller or anything, and we cut that one line, and about $15,000 worth of equipment went right to the bottom. Some of the things I think, if you own a boat, that you should have on board. I didn't have a set of cable cutters. That would have been helpful. I have a set now. I have a good hacksaw with a good blade in it, because that can cut through a lot of stuff. I didn't put anybody in life jackets, which I should have done as soon as they started working on deck, because the boat was rolling, and because of the severity of the accident, they were in shock. I didn't realize it at the time, but as soon as we cleared the wreckage, everybody got sick. The entire crew got sick. Now, these were experienced sailors. They were coming out of the experience that we had. So I should have had life jackets on everybody, and I didn't do that. I didn't have the proper medical supplies on board. I had Band-Aids, and that was about it. But I didn't have any means of treating a serious injury.
I appreciate that, Chuck. We're out of time now. And I do thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. And we'll be back on another time, another show, and another topic. We hope the show does save lives and educate new boaters. Thank you for watching Captain's Log.